This isn't set a thought experiment. This is a collapse, the slow unraveling of everything you assumed existed. Because reality isn't solid, it isn't stable, and it might not even be there when you blink. This video isn't set here to explain the universe. It's set here to dissolve you in it. Each section will pull you deeper, into mirrors that reflect nothing, brains that hallucinate themselves, and worlds that vanish when unobserved. Sleep, if you can. But nothing is waiting when you wake. You stir walking through a city. Cars hum past. Screens flash. Strangers scroll through their lives. Everything feels normal, until you notice a pattern. The same man crossing the street, again. The same ad playing, again. The same conversation, looping like code caught in a glitch. This is the simulation argument, and you're the hypothesis. In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom posed a question that would fracture the foundations of reality. If future civilizations gain the power to run ancestor simulations, then statistically, you are more likely to be one of those simulated ancestors than a real one. Let's break it. Now imagine they done it billions of times. Why? Maybe for profit. Maybe to study their own past. If such simulations are possible, and they run more simulations than real human histories, then the probability that you're in a base reality drops to near zero. You stir not living life. You stir executing a subroutine. The glitches you notice? They stir not bugs in your mind. They sip missed frames in the code. Déjà vu. Coincidences. People who act like NPCs when you're not paying attention. You weren't set born. You were booted up. This theory isn't set new. Even Decart wondered if he was being deceived by an evil demon, a puppet master feeding illusions into his senses. Today, the demon wears a headset. We build VR worlds. We create AI personas. We code universes in Minecraft that run on mathematical laws. And we call it play. But what if someone else is playing you? The physics of your world, quantized, digital, pixel-like at the smallest scales, behave suspiciously like computer code. Try to zoom in beyond it, and reality stops rendering. Your brain accepts this because it evolved to survive, not to perceive truth. And in this simulation, belief is a function. You're allowed to doubt, just enough to stay entertained, but never enough to exit. Because what would that even mean? No unplugging. No red pill. Only awareness that your actions, thoughts, even rebellions, were pre-written lines of logic in a cosmic sandbox. And yet, the paradox. If you're aware of the simulation, does that make you more real or less? You never seen your own consciousness. Only a model of it. You stir not dreaming the world. The world is dreaming you. And the moment you realize this, a second thought creeps in. Not only is the world a simulation, but the you experiencing it might be simulated too. Not just your body, but yourself. The code becomes aware of the code. So here's the closing loop. If this is a simulation, and you are a simulated mind inside it, asking whether it accepts a simulation, then every question you ask is part of the simulation. Even this one. Every answer is a line of code. Every doubt was pre-programmed. And reality as you know it may just be the loading screen. You sit still in a quiet room. No sound, no light, only thought. The kind of stillness that feels like peeling yourself off the surface of the world. And then, like a whisper through static, the question hits. How do I know anything is real? This is where René Descartes began. It's 1641. Descartes is alone with his thoughts, doubting everything, the world, his senses, even his own body. Maybe it's all an illusion, a dream, a lie from some malicious force. So he strips it all away. Everything. I think, therefore I am. But what does that really mean? It means the only thing you can't doubt is the fact that you're doubting. The only certainty in the entire universe is the presence of thought, not your body, not this room, not time, not space. Just this flickering stream of consciousness. But that sip's not a foundation. That sip's a cliff. But you can sit to prove the chair exists. Or the light. Or your hands. They could be projections, shadows cast on a wall you've never seen. Your senses are unreliable. They feed you data, sure. Think of dreams. You accept them while inside them. The laws of physics bend and warp, but your mind adapts. Only after waking do you question their truth. But what if you never wake up? Even the rules you use to think might be false. This isn't set to thought experiment. The self you feel is just a point of awareness, watching its own assumptions dissolve. Descartes tried to escape the abyss with reason. He used God's perfection to argue the senses must be trustworthy, that a benevolent being wouldn't deceive us. What if the deceiver is instead a demon? Your brain didn't evolve to see truth. It evolved to help you survive. If that means hiding reality behind a curtain of comforting illusions, so be it. Colors aren't real. They're electromagnetic frequencies filtered through biology. Objects are mostly empty space. Time is a concept stitched from memory. And yet we live like it sits all solid. But Descartes showed that even if the world is false, the act of questioning it is real. And that sits terrifying. Because it means you are real, but alone, surrounded by shadows, unable to reach outside yourself. Think of your life. The memories, the people, the moments you hold on to. Could they all be inside you? No external world, just layers of internal storytelling. There is no ground beneath you. Only the thought that there might be. And even that thought might not be yours. So here sits the loop. If the only thing you can be sure of is that you think, then who, or what, is doing the thinking? A soul? Or just a neural echo, endlessly convincing itself it exists? But maybe he should stayed in the void. Maybe that sits where the truth is. Because in this void, there sips no deception, only silence. And silence doesn't lie. But what if none of this proves anything? Don't stick exist at all? What if you are nothing more than a brain, floating in a vat, wired to a simulation you mistake for life? This is the thought experiment that hijacks philosophy classes and late-night existential spirals, the brain in a vat scenario. First introduced by philosophers like Gilbert Harman and later Hilary Putnam, it's a modern twist on Descartes' demon. Instead of a deceiver feeding illusions to your soul, it's a computer feeding signals to your cortex. Your eyes? Not real. Your nerves? Faked. Your memories? Uploaded. You stir a sealed-off consciousness. A slab of grey matter suspended in nutrient gel, electrodes plugged into every crevice of your reality. And the wild part? You never know. Because everything you experience, every laugh, every heartbreak, every sunrise, could be just electrical signals interpreted as life. That apple you bit into last week? A neural input labeled crunch. The smile from someone across the street? A line of code triggering the warmth protocol in your ventromedial prefrontal cortex. You can't trust your senses, because they're not yours. They sit part of the program. In this view, the entire universe is a simulation rendered for one spectator. But it gets weirder. Hilary Putnam argued that if you were a brain in a vat, you couldn't even form the thought, I am a brain in a vat, meaningfully. Because your words wouldn't refer to anything real. Your concept of brain? It comes from the simulation. Your idea of vat? Also fake. So the sentence becomes a paradox. If it seems meaningful, it must be false. You're trapped in a linguistic prison, thinking thoughts about a world that might not exist, using language that never touched anything real. Still think you sit safe? Try this. Close your eyes. What sits still there? Maybe thoughts. Maybe silence. Now imagine your entire life has been spent this way, dreaming. Not a nightmare, not a fantasy, just an endlessly convincing hallucination. Because waking up is just another neural input. The problem is that there might never have been a you outside it. Science doesn't save you here either. You could say, but look, science proves the world is consistent. We test, we measure. But all your measurements are internal. You're like a dream character proving the laws of dream physics by bouncing rubber balls off dream walls. Your lab equipment could be part of the simulation. Your doubt, programmed. And the biggest twist. Even if you were a brain in a vat, that wouldn't change your life one bit. Because this is still the only world you have access to. Still the only pain you feel. Still the only love you know. Illusion doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it fragile. So what are you left with? Just a mind, floating in maybe space, trying to reconstruct a reality it can never touch. Everything you believe could be fiction. And yet, you keep believing. You eat, sleep, love, mourn, all inside the simulation. And the simulation responds. But sometimes, you feel it glitch. A conversation that loops. A memory you don't start remember making. These aren't sipped signs of madness. They sep signs of awareness. You are the brain, yes. But also the vat. Also the programmer. Also the story. And the story is asking itself, am I real? But here sips the trapdoor. It doesn't matter. Because the question is part of the simulation too. There's a word, old, Sanskrit, older than time, Maya. It doesn't set mean magic. It doesn't set mean dream. It means illusion, the veil that wraps around the world and convinces you it's real. You don't live in the universe. And Maya lives in you. It's a foundational concept of Hinduism, Vedanta, and Buddhism, a spiritual technology so ancient it predates even language systems that could record it. It sips a filtered projection, a mental puppet show, the ultimate misdirection. You think you stare looking at a tree, but you're looking at your perception of a tree. You think you hear your friend Sip's voice, but you're hearing a reconstructed echo inside your brain. Every sense you trust is lying to you. And Maya is the grand deceiver, not malevolent, not cruel, just endlessly persistent. It says, this is a table. This is who you are. And you believe it. But under Maya, the self is a fiction. The body is a shadow. The world is a flickering play of light and form. In the Upanishads it's said that Brahman, the ultimate, formless, infinite reality, lies behind the curtain. But we don't see Brahman. We see Maya, patterns, shapes, distinctions. You know how a movie projects still images so fast they look like movement? That sips Maya. You sip mistaken the waves for the ocean. Here sips the twist. You aren't sipped, just surrounded by illusion. You are the illusion. Your identity, your name, memories, opinions, traumas. These aren't fixed truths. They stir constructs emerging from Maya. You tell the story of you, as if it were written in stone, but it sits written in fog. You are the dream dreaming itself. In Buddhism, they go further. They say everything is empty, not meaningless, but devoid of inherent existence. That cup on your desk exists only because your mind places it there. Its cupness is a label you invented. Even time, that steady current you swear by, is Maya, a trick of memory and sequence. The past is gone. The future hasn't yet arrived. The present already vanished the moment you named it. This isn't set hopeless. It sips liberation. Because if everything is illusion, then suffering is too. The fear, the clinging, the identity crises, all emerge from mistaking shadows for substance. But here sips the real riddle. If you see through Maya, are you free? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, the wise see no difference between a priest and a beggar, a cow and an elephant, because all forms are Maya. And once you know that, really know it, you stop playing favorites with reality. You stop assuming you set were right. You stop assuming you even exist as the one who is right. You become the dreamer, the dreamed, and the dream itself, all flickering into and out of view. And yet the paradox persists. You still cry when you sit or hurt. You still miss people. You still bleed. Illusion or not, the pain feels real. But so does joy. So does awe. So does that unnameable moment when something inside you softens and watches the world without judgment. That, too, is Maya. The illusion is total, and knowing it doesn't stop it. It just makes it beautiful. Everything becomes sacred. Let Sips imagine this. You're looking at your hand. You wiggle your fingers. You feel the table beneath them. You hear a faint hum from the ceiling fan. Now pause. How do you know any of that is real? Not feel, not assume, not believe. No. Welcome to the problem of the external world, one of the oldest, most paralyzing questions in philosophy. It asks a seemingly simple thing, but the actual, independent, objective thing. Can you prove that the table is there when you close your eyes? That there is a reality beyond your perception of it? You might say, of course there is. That seems obvious. But here's the trap. Everything you know about the external world comes through your senses, and your senses are internal. When you touch something, you're not feeling the object. You're feeling electrical signals triggered by nerve endings and interpreted by your brain. When you see something, you're not seeing it. You're seeing light bounced off it, filtered through lenses, flipped upside down, converted into electrical impulses, and rendered in a visual cortex simulation. You're living in a 3D hallucination. One so convincing, you forgot it was a hallucination. Philosopher Immanuel Kant took this seriously. He proposed that we never actually perceive the world as it is. We perceive it only as it appears to us, through the filter of human consciousness. He called it the noumenon, the thing in itself, something we can never access. Or they may not. You have no way to know for sure. Think of this. You dream at night. You walk down dream streets, talk to dream people, feel dream pain, and it all feels real, until it isn't set. What if the only difference is that you haven't woken up yet? Or worse, what if there is no waking up? Bertrand Russell once asked. You can prove it wasn't it. Because all your evidence, memory, perception, emotion, is part of the very system under suspicion. It's like trying to escape a room by drawing a door on the wall. You're still inside. You might say, but I can interact with the world. I knock, it makes sound. I drop a glass, it shatters. Sure, but all that feedback loop proves is consistency, not reality. A video game has consistent physics too. So does a dream. A delusion isn't less convincing just because it's false. What if you stir the only thing that exists? What if everyone else, your friends, family, the cashier, the stars, are just parts of your mind's story? Solipsism lurks nearby, the idea that only your own mind is certain to exist. You talk to someone, and they respond. You infer it. The same way you infer the existence of gravity, or time, or love. Not because you perceive them directly, but because you believe in the patterns. Perception is not confirmation. So what is the world? A painting you can't step outside of. A movie where you're the only audience, and maybe the only actor. You feel trapped yet free, alone yet connected. Real, yet unreal. Because the world might be external. It might not. But either way, you'll never know. If the only reality you can access is inside your mind, then your mind is the world. But if your mind is a product of the world, then the world must be real. Unless, both are illusions propping each other up. Like a mirror reflecting another mirror. Infinite, empty, and echoing forever. There sips a hole in the foundation of reality. Not a crack. A gaping paradoxical void. It lives at the quantum level, the smallest scale we can measure. Smaller than atoms. Smaller than electrons. A world where things don't just behave weirdly. They behave impossibly. Welcome to the observer effect in quantum mechanics. A theory that suggests reality doesn't exist until you look at it. Let that sink in. Not you can see it. Not you don't understand it. But it literally isn't there until it is measured. This begins with the famous double-slit experiment. As if each particle had gone through both slits at once, interfering with itself. But the moment scientists measured which slit the particle went through, the wave collapsed. The particle chose a path. No more interference. No more weirdness. Just boring, predictable particles. In other words, when unobserved, particles act like probabilities. They exist in superposition, multiple states at once. But when observed, they collapse into a single outcome. So what collapses the wave function? What forces the universe to make up its mind? The observer. Which leads to a disturbing implication. Consciousness may be required to crystallize reality. Reality isn't set real until you check on it. This isn't set science fiction. This is mainstream quantum physics. And no one can fully explain it. Think of it like this. The universe is a blur of potential until a conscious mind decides to measure it. And in that moment, the blur hardens into something real. After observation, a rock. The implications are insane. Are the stars there when you sit, not looking? Is your bedroom even there when you leave it? And what is observation anyway? Does it require a human? A camera? A lab instrument? A thought? Some interpretations say yes, that conscious awareness is what collapses probabilities into facts. Others try to sidestep it, inventing many worlds, hidden variables, or decoherence. But none of them solve the core puzzle. If a tree falls in a quantum forest, and no one observes it, did the particles collapse? Did the tree exist? Let's just go deeper. In 2022, a group of physicists ran a version of the double-slit experiment called the Wigner's friend scenario. It showed that two observers can experience contradictory realities, and both be correct from their perspective. Your reality might not match someone else's, and both can be internally consistent. So what is real? Nothing, until you participate in it. You are not just watching the movie. Frame by frame, collapse by collapse. And the weirdest part? The universe may have no default state. It only becomes definite when entangled with a conscious observer. That means the building blocks of your world, atoms, light, matter, have no identity until you ask them to reveal one. Reality doesn't set to pre-exist you. It unfolds around you, like a stage built just fast enough to keep up with the play. This isn't set a metaphor. This is physics. And it leads to an unsettling loop. If reality requires observation to exist, but you, the observer, are part of reality, then who observed you into existence? Who collapsed your wave function? Did you exist before you were seen? Or are you still collapsing, moment by moment, into the illusion of continuity? Here sets the loop. You start not looking at the world. You steer co-creating it. And the more you try to pin it down, the faster it slips into probabilities again. Reality is not a place. It sips a question mark that only appears when you dare to ask. You stir sitting in your room. Walls solid, floor grounded. You feel your breath. You hear faint traffic outside. Everything seems normal. But how do you know you sit, not dreaming? This isn't sipped paranoia. It's the dream argument, and it's been haunting philosophy since Plato, Chuang Tzu, and especially Decart. If you can tell the difference between dreaming and waking, how do you know which one you are in right now? Dreams simulate reality so perfectly that you rarely notice. You walk through a city made of fog and memory. You talk to people who don't exist. You feel emotions, pain, joy, all without a physical world. And when you wake up, you say, oh, that wasn't real. But it felt real. So what makes this moment, this screen, this breath, any different? If your dreams can create entire worlds overnight, who's to say this world wasn't just another one of them? You might say, but in dreams, things are strange. They shift. They don't follow logic. True, but only in hindsight. While dreaming, your brain invents explanations to maintain the illusion. That flying car? Just part of the story. That missing wall? It made sense at the time. Your mind fills in blanks with such confidence that you never question the scene until you wake. So again, what if this is that? A longer, deeper, stickier dream? There's no test. You can pinch yourself, check a clock, stare into a mirror. There's no reliable escape hatch. And maybe that sips the point. Philosopher Thomas Metzinger goes even further. He suggests that our waking experience is already a dream. A controlled hallucination generated by the brain to model reality, not show it. You stir dreaming with your eyes open. And the dream is convincing because it's consistent. Not because it sits true. Lucid dreamers know this intimately. They wake up inside the dream, realize they're dreaming, and suddenly have power. They fly. They reshape buildings. They question the script. But even lucidity doesn't prove waking. It just proves that layers exist. So what if this world, the one you cling to, is just one of many stacked dreams? What if you're dreaming you woke up, again and again, and never stopped? Buddhist philosophy teaches this exact idea, that samsara, the cycle of life, is itself a dream. You're not awake because you left sleep. You're awake when you stop mistaking appearances for reality. In other words, you don't need to wake up in the physical sense. And that changes everything. You might finally see that your job, your fears, your name, are dream roles. Temporary, imagined, fluid. They drift in and out of focus like dream characters. You have been so busy surviving this dream, you forgot to question who sips doing the dreaming. Maybe there is no dreamer. Maybe you are just part of the dream too. A character dreaming itself into existence. That sips the deepest layer. Not that this is a dream, but that you are the dream. So here sips the loop. You can sit prove you set her awake. You can sit prove you sit pre-dreaming. And you can sit prove there sips a difference. All you have is this flickering moment. This fragile awareness. This echo of thought asking, what if I never wake up? And the silence that follows. You can explain how a heart pumps. You can explain how lungs fill with air. You can describe the flow of blood, the wiring of nerves, the mechanics of motion. But you cannot, no matter how hard you try, explain why you experience anything at all. Why does sadness ache instead of just reducing serotonin? Why does music make you cry, when it's just vibrations in air? This is the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains the deepest crack in the walls of material science. Coined by philosopher David Chalmers in the 1990s, the hard problem isn't about how the brain processes information. It's about why any of it results in experience. It receives input, processes signals, and triggers outputs. That's the easy problem. How neurons fire, how signals travel. But none of that explains why it feels like something to be you. Why does it light up with color, flavor, pain, memory, yearning? This gap between processing and awareness is unbridgeable. You could map every neuron. You could simulate your entire brain on a supercomputer. But that doesn't answer the question. Would the simulation feel like something? Would it have an inner world? Or just act like it? But that still doesn't explain who sits watching. Others say consciousness is a byproduct, an emergent property of complexity, like how water is wet, even though individual HSO molecules aren't. But even then, why should complexity give rise to subjectivity? Why should billions of neurons suddenly say, I am? There is no scientific explanation for why you feel, only models that dance around the fire, never touching it. Think of it this way. But that one sit tell you what blue feels like. You can define pain neurologically, but that won't let you taste someone else's suffering. Consciousness is not something we observe. It stips the very lens through which we observe, and trying to turn the lens inward breaks it. Even the most advanced brain scanners don't detect experience. They detect correlation. They see which parts of the brain light up when you taste chocolate, but they still never taste it for you. So here sits the paradox. We understand everything in the world through something we don't understand at all. The very tool we use to know the universe is the universe's greatest mystery, and that mystery lives in you. Every second you're awake, there's something happening behind your eyes. Not just input, but being. You don't know where it comes from. You can find it on an MRI, and yet, it's the most obvious thing in the world. So obvious, in fact, that we forget how impossible it is. Try to locate your consciousness. You won't find it in your head. You won't find it in your body. You won't find it in the world. It's not a thing. And some philosophers, like Thomas Nagel, argue that every organism might have a point of view. Even a beetle. Maybe even a rock. We don't know. Because we can step outside ourselves. You only know what it sits like to be you. And even that is murky. So here sits the final loop. You are made of atoms. And atoms don't think. You are made of meat. And meat doesn't feel. And yet, you are aware. Aware of being. Aware of wandering. Aware of this sentence. That awareness has no source, no weight, no proof. But without it, nothing else exists. So the hard problem remains. Why are you you? And deeper still, is anyone there at all? You open your eyes and see a world. Clear, crisp, seamless. A cup of tea sits on the table. You reach for it, not even thinking. No filters, no layers, just direct experience. But that sips the illusion. It means your mind creates a virtual reality, and then tricks you into forgetting it. Sits virtual. You don't see neurons firing. You don't see the processing. You don't see the simulation. You just see a world, smooth, stitched, and convincingly solid. You are the avatar inside the game, utterly convinced you're not in a game at all. This doesn't just apply to your surroundings. It applies to you. The self you feel, the inner narrator, the thinker behind your thoughts. That too is a model, a construct built by the brain. But it feels transparent. It doesn't feel like a story. It feels like you. And that sips the trick. Metzinger explains. In other words, if you could see the trick, it would stop working. So the mind hides it. It makes its models invisible to introspection. You don't experience the pixels, only the picture. This is why you never doubt your own selfhood. You feel like you're located behind your eyes, steering the ship. But neuroscience shows no such pilot. No control room. Just decentralized processes, emotion, memory, attention, woven together like a story with no author. But the transparency of that story makes it feel real. This is the most intimate illusion. That you are someone. That there is a you having experiences. In truth, there are just experiences. No one behind them. Phenomenal transparency keeps you from seeing this. And that blindness is necessary. Because if you saw the model, you might stop believing in the self altogether. You might stop functioning. Imagine if your vision suddenly glitched and you saw neural maps instead of objects. If your thoughts appeared as code on a screen. If your sense of self melted into a shifting collage of inputs and predictions. You set to collapse. Not physically, but existentially. Your sense of being would disintegrate. That's why the illusion is so airtight. Your consciousness is like a lens that refuses to look at itself. Because if it did, it would vanish. This has implications far beyond neuroscience. It suggests that what you call reality is a recursive hallucination. A hallucination so perfect, it forgot it was one. You can know this intellectually. You can study the science, read the philosophy, but you still feel like a self. You still wake up in the morning and think, I stun me. You still suffer when hurt. Still love when close. Still act as if you are real. Because transparency doesn't go away just because you see it. It sits built into the architecture of experience. It's like trying to look at your own eyes without a mirror. You start caught in the loop. Your thoughts arise. And you say, I thought that. Another thought. So here sits the loop. Everything you experience, the world, your body, yourself, is a simulation. But the simulation is invisible. Because if it weren't it wouldn't work. You are a transparent interface, pretending to be a person. A hallucination convinced it sits awake. And once you realize this, you don't wake up. You wake up, stretch, look in the mirror. You say, yep, that sips me. This is the ship of Thesius problem, an ancient paradox of identity. And it doesn't just apply to boats. It applies to you. The story goes like this. A great ship. Theseus's ship sails for many years. As time passes, its wooden planks rot and are replaced, one by one. Eventually, every single part is swapped out. So the question is, if yes, then identity doesn't depend on material. Now imagine this. Someone gathers all the discarded parts and reassembles the old ship in a new location. Now that ship is made of the original materials. So which one is the real ship of Thesius? The one with continuity, or the one with the original matter? Think of yourself. You've replaced every cell in your body multiple times. Even your brain. The very thing you call you has rewired itself, restructured, reshaped across your life. The you that existed 10 years ago is gone. So who is looking through your eyes right now? Are you the same person? Or just the current version wearing the same name? We like to think identity is continuous. That we are a single, unbroken I, traveling through time. But what if that sip's just a convenient illusion? A psychological placeholder? A story? Let steps make it stranger. What if we gradually replaced your brain with artificial parts, neuron by neuron, each one functioning exactly the same as the original? At what point do you stop being you? At 1% replacement? 50%? 99%? What if the final neuron is replaced? Are you still you? Or a perfect copy? And if someone built a full replica of your body and brain from scratch, a carbon copy down to the last synapse, would it be you, or just someone who thinks they sit to you? The ship of Thesius asks. In the continuity, in the memory, continuity breaks, and materials rot. So maybe identity isn't it a thing. You change your mind. You evolve. And yet you say, this is who I am. But you are a shifting sand dune, always changing, never the same. Think about this. Would you still be you? If you can remember who you are you? The loop tightens. Because even this question is being asked by this version of you, not the one from yesterday. And tomorrow? Another ship. Another version. So here sits the paradox. There is no original you. Just a process. A flow. A vessel endlessly replacing itself while insisting it's the same. You are the ship of Thesius. And you stir sinking and sailing at the same time. You watch someone stub their toe. You flinch. You feel it, not physically but emotionally, as if some ghostly echo of pain passed through you. That moment? It sips not empathy. It sips not imagination. Discovered in the 1990s by neuroscientists studying monkeys, mirror neurons are cells that activate both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else doing it. The monkey grabs a peanut. Neurons fire. A scientist grabs a peanut, and the same neurons fire in the monkey's brain. In other words, the monkey sep's brain mirrors the action, as if it were doing it too. And humans? We stir full of these cells. When you watch someone cry, your face tightens. When someone smiles, you feel a tug in your cheeks. This raises a terrifying question. Where do you end, and someone else begin? If your brain is constantly rehearsing the movements, feelings, and sensations of others, then your consciousness might not be yours at all. It might be a hall of mirrors, a collection of borrowed selves. When a baby mimics facial expressions, when a teenager imitates their idols, when you absorb the mood of a room without speaking, that sips mirror neurons at work. But sometimes, the mirrors misfire. Or too strongly. Or for things that aren't real. You might flinch at a video game injury. Cry at a fictional death. Your body doesn't care. They just reflect. Which means your sense of reality, your emotions, your empathy, even your memory, can be hijacked. You stir not experiencing you. And if that sips the case, then, who are you? A borrowed script? A reflection of others reflecting you? What if you just a container for other people's seps? Neural ghosts. Metzinger and others suggest the self is a user illusion. And mirror neurons might be part of how that interface stays in sync with the social world. They help you blend in. They help you become. But become what? What everyone else already is. You absorb. You repeat. Until eventually, you mistake the reflection for the original. This isn't sept empathy. You smile because someone smiled. You hurt because someone hurt. But what if their pain was false? Used to have mirrored it anyway. Felt the echo. Adopted the ghost. Your consciousness is porous. Mirror neurons don't care about boundaries. They just light up. And with enough repetition, you don't just feel what others feel. You become who others are. And here sips the recursive nightmare. If everyone is reflecting everyone else, then there might not be a single original thought left. Looking into mirrors. Forever. So here sips the loop. But that self was modeled, borrowed, mimicked, and mirrored. A feedback loop of rehearsed reactions. A face in a mirror that never ends. You are not the actor. You stir the echo. And the echo thinks it sits alive. Right now, you stirred having a unified experience. You see these words. Maybe hear ambient sounds. Feel the weight of your body. Smell something faint in the air. And somehow, it all comes together as one moment. This is the binding problem. One of the great unsolved mysteries of consciousness. Your brain doesn't process reality as a whole. It breaks it apart. Color is handled in one region. Motion in another still. Sound in a different lobe entirely. Smell, deeper still. Emotion, memory, language, all scattered across the cortex. No place where it all comes together. And yet, somehow, you feel whole. Not like a bundle of disconnected sensations. Not like fragments in a blender. You feel like you right here, right now. Why? No one knows. This isn't set to minor glitch in the system. The binding problem asks, how does your brain unify billions of separate signals into a single fluid stream of conscious experience? And why does that stream feel like you? You might assume there's a you receiving all this input. A central self, like a conductor orchestrating the symphony of sense. But neuroscientists can find that conductor. They find noise, signals, activity, correlations, but no center, no soul. There sits no little person behind your eyes. Just trillions of neurons firing in distributed patterns, and somehow creating oneness. This would be like assembling a jigsaw puzzle without a table, without a guide, while the pieces are constantly changing shape, and still ending up with a perfect picture. Every moment, your brain binds color, shape, sound, smell, and more, and you never notice the seams. But the seams are there. Just slow down for a second. Look closely at your thoughts. Feel how a sound arrives after a sight, how a memory disrupts the flow, how a smell can hijack everything. You stir not a solid stream. You're a stitched mosaic pretending to be continuous. The binding is an illusion, a guess, a best fit model of now. And the most disturbing part, the you having this experience is part of the illusion. You don't have a self. You are the feeling of being bound together. That sips it. Your selfhood is just another binding, another guess your brain made. And like all guesses, it can fall apart. Trauma can shatter it. Drugs can dissolve it. Split brain patients, for example, show that each hemisphere of the brain can operate independently. What does that say about unity? And fake. And sometimes, it never binds at all. In dissociative disorders, people feel like parts of themselves are missing, as if the self was never assembled correctly. And yet, we all cling to the illusion of being whole. Because the alternative, that you set a disjointed choir of voices and sensations pretending to sing in harmony, is too terrifying to accept. But here sits the loop. You are not the conductor. You are not the orchestra. You are not the music. You're the illusion that all of it was ever playing the same song. You stir the binding, and the binding is broken. You see a face. It starts rotating slowly. At first it looks like a normal human face, curving outward with familiar contours. But then, something doesn't add up. The rotation keeps going. And suddenly, the face is inside out, a hollow mask turning toward you. Instead, it flips the image. It forces the concave face to appear convex. Because your mind has made a decision long ago. Faces do not cave in. This is the hollow mask illusion, and it doesn't just trick your eyes. It exposes how reality itself is built from assumptions, not facts. Even when shown a hollow face, with lighting, shadows, and physics clearly indicating depth. This is a normal face, because it expects a normal face, and it will rewrite perception to match that expectation. This illusion is so powerful, even when you know the truth, you still see the lie. That sips the lesson. You see with your predictions, your brain is not a passive receiver of sensory input. It's an active sculptor, shaping every moment before you even become aware of it. Vision is post-processed hallucination. What you call reality is a story your brain generates based on what it expects to be there. And when there sips conflict between what sips real and what sips predicted, it corrects the world to make it wrong in the right way. So how much of your life is being hollow masked? How many things have you never seen for what they are? Because your mind wouldn't allow it. You see the version of them your brain wants to see. You reconstruct the past to fit your narrative. You do this with yourself. I am this kind of person. I would never do that. I know who I am. But those are hollow masks too. Your identity is a prediction, backed by years of expectation and confirmation bias. And when life tries to show you something contradictory, a failure, a betrayal, a shadow of yourself, you flip it. You rather live inside a false face than admit the truth, caves inward. They often see the hollow face correctly, because their brains don't impose the same rigid priors. In other words, the normal brain lies more efficiently. It chooses consistency over truth, and that raises a disturbing possibility. Maybe the only reason you think you're sane is because your brain is hiding the evidence. Obvious. Normal. But under the surface, your perception is warped, bent, and edited every millisecond, so that you don't have to deal with a reality that doesn't make sense. Your sanity is a mask. Your confidence is a mask. Your beliefs are masks. And your brain is flipping every one of them outward, pretending they sipped a whole when they sipped a hollow. So here sips the loop. You never see the world as it is. You see it as your mind allows it to be. And when truth turns toward you, hollow, echoing, impossible. And lie to yourself one more time. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel your breath. Now open them. The world returns. Sharp, full, familiar. What if it was never gone, because it was never really there to begin with? What if your brain wasn't seeing the world, but predicting it? This is the predictive mind model, one of the most groundbreaking and unsettling frameworks in modern neuroscience. It says your brain is not a camera. Everything you perceive is a prediction. Everything you experience is a controlled hallucination, constantly updated to match incoming signals. You don't hear sound. You predict what the sound should be, then compare it to actual vibrations. You don't feel your body. You predict its position, then reconcile that with sensory feedback. And vision. Vision is the brain's best guess about what's probably out there, based on past experience, expectations, and context. This model explains a lot: why we fall for optical illusions, why we mishear lyrics, why déjà vu happens, why the world feels coherent even when we're not paying attention. But it also opens a terrifying door. If perception is prediction, then reality is whatever your brain thinks is most likely. Not what is, but what fits. Imagine walking through your house at night. You know where everything is. You don't need light. Your brain fills in the blanks. Now imagine doing that all the time, even in full daylight. That sips the predictive brain. It fills in faster than reality can load. And the errors? It hides the glitches, like a magician hiding the sleight of hand. This means you are not living in the world. You're living in a model of the world, a constantly evolving simulation that only updates when it has to. And you only notice the real world when the model breaks. A sudden bang, a flicker of movement, a face you don't expect. Your brain pauses and says, wait, that wasn't in the script. Otherwise, it keeps you on autopilot, hallucinating the expected 24/7s. Now, here sits where it gets deeper. The brain doesn't just predict the external world. It predicts you, your thoughts, your emotions. When you feel fear, your brain isn't reacting to danger. It's predicting fear, then generating bodily sensations to match. When you feel sadness, it might be a guess, based on posture, memory, time of day, blood sugar. You are not experiencing feelings. You are predicting them, and then believing in your own forecast. So what happens when your brain predicts wrong? You feel pain where there is no injury. You remember things that never happened. You believe you someone you not. You become a glitch in your own simulation. And the system doesn't correct itself. It doubles down. It tries to resolve the error by making the model more complicated. How phantom limbs ache. How trauma warps time. Your entire life, this moment, this thought, this you, is the brain's best guess. And its guessing right now is a prediction your brain is predicting it's having. Recursive. Looped. So here sits the paradox. If everything you know is a guess, then even your doubt is a guess. Even your skepticism. Even your resistance to this idea, predicted, constructed, and filtered through the very system under suspicion. You can step outside the loop, because you are the loop. You are the brain's simulation of itself, predicting a world, and calling it real. You don't see reality. And if you've been hallucinating correctly your whole life, would you ever know? Imagine a room. Inside the room is a person who doesn't speak a word of Chinese. Not one symbol, not one phrase, Nothing. But the room is filled with books. Massive rule books that explain, in perfect detail, how to respond to Chinese characters with other Chinese characters. The person inside receives a slip of paper with Chinese writing. They look it up, follow the rules, match symbols, output a reply. To someone outside the room, the answers are flawless. It seems like the person inside understands Chinese. But they don't sit. They are just manipulating symbols. This is the Chinese room argument, proposed by philosopher John Searle in 1980. And it shattered the assumptions of artificial intelligence, and maybe your assumptions about you. Here sits the point. Just because a system behaves as if it understands doesn't mean it actually understands. And that brings us to you. Your brain is full of rule books, neural pathways, electrical impulses, pattern recognitions, stimulus response maps. You respond to language, emotion, memory, smells. But what if that SIP's all you are? An elaborate system for symbol manipulation, with no one inside who understands. You think you're conscious, that there's a self, a soul, feeling the world, understanding life. But what if you're just the room? Searle's argument wasn't about denying consciousness. It was about denying that computation alone creates consciousness. But if your brain is only computation, is there a ghost in the machine? Some spark that makes experience feel like experience? Or are we fooled by our own fluency? You speak English so well, in fact, that you believe the thoughts in your head have meaning. But meaning is subjective. It SIP's interpretation, not computation. You might be generating thoughts like the Chinese room generates answers. So what counts as understanding? If a machine simulates empathy, do we call it real empathy? If a human simulates joy but feels nothing inside, is it still joy? And what if the same is true for pain, memory, or love? Maybe we are all just rooms, interpreting symbols we don't set comprehend, performing the right outputs, playing our roles, convincing others and ourselves that someone is home. But here sits the twist. The Chinese room is not just about AI. It's about you and the illusion of internal understanding. Because when you think a thought, do you understand it? Or do you just experience the feeling of understanding? When someone asks how you feel, you say sad, tired, anxious. But where did those words come from? Maybe they were just matched, slotted into the blank, assembled from the rulebook of memory and culture and biology. And here sits the paradox. If you're more than the Chinese room, then what are you? What part of you knows what you SIPs are saying? What part experiences? No one SIPs ever found it. Just more rules, more neurons, more black boxes within black boxes. So here sits the loop. You stir not inside your mind. You are the mind. And the mind may just be a room, processing symbols, performing intelligence, but never feeling it. You set mimicking thinking and mistaking fluency for self. You meet someone on the street. They smile, say hello, talk about the weather. They seem perfectly normal, warm, aware, human. But what if they said not? What if they sit a philosophical zombie, a being that behaves exactly like a person, but feels nothing inside? They walk, talk, laugh, cry. They flinch at pain, grieve at funerals, gasp at beauty. But it sits all empty. No inner world, no consciousness, no experience. Just stimulus and response. A hollow echo of humanity. This is the zombie argument, and it's one of the most unsettling thought experiments in the philosophy of mind. It was made famous by David Chalmers, the same mind behind the hard problem of consciousness. And it asks, if it sits logically possible to imagine a being that does everything you do, but with no inner awareness, then how do you know you steer, not one? How do you know anyone else is real inside? You don't stet. You assume, because you want to believe they sit like you. What if your world is filled with perfect imitations, entities that look, sound, and move like people, but are utterly unconscious? Not evil, not machines, just empty. And what if the same is true of you? You feel conscious. But that SIP's part of the script too. The zombie doesn't stit, no, it stits a zombie. It says I think, I feel, I SIP'm real. because that's what its programming tells it to say. And you? Maybe you stir no different. You claim to feel pain. You claim to remember. But where sits the proof? Where's the thing that makes you more than a zombie? Philosophers can find it. Neuroscientists can locate it. No instrument has ever detected consciousness directly. Only behavior. Only output. So what if consciousness isn't necessary? Is just the simulation of experience? But that doesn't mean you are one. And now the loop tightens. You think you have feelings. But so does the zombie. You think you understand yourself. But so does the zombie. You think you stirred not a zombie, because a zombie wouldn't ask that. But it would. That's the point. The zombie is indistinguishable from the real. And so are you. So here sits the loop. If it's possible to imagine a world of perfect philosophical zombies, then maybe you live in one. And the voice in your head whispering, "But I am real," is just part of the script. You stir performing consciousness, acting it out, believing in the role so completely, you forgot it was a role at all, a solid one, with objects, rules, truth. You believe the chair you're sitting on is real, even when you're not thinking about it. That facts exist whether or not you observe them. That reality persists. But what if it doesn't? What if reality isn't out there, but in here, and only ever has been? Not denial, not fantasy, but the claim that reality has no independent existence outside of our concepts, language, or perception. In other words, there is no reality without a mind to frame it. AntiRealism comes in many forms: epistemological, semantic, metaphysical. But all roads lead to one haunting conclusion. Reality is not discovered, it's constructed. You think science finds truth? AntiRealism says, no, it builds models. Useful ones, sure, but still inventions, like scaffolding that never touches the ground. They don't. They invent a narrative, tuned by evolution for survival, not truth. You think facts exist independently of you? But facts require concepts. Concepts require language. Language is a human invention. You might say, but if I step into the road and get hit by a bus, it doesn't matter what I believe. Fair. But even that pain, that bus, that impact, is filtered through layers of interpretation. You have never accessed the world, only your idea of it. It says existence has no meaning without a framework to define it. There may be something out there, but out there is a phrase, a mental map, a concept shaped by consciousness. Not on the earth, not in a universe, but within the web of concepts you've never stepped outside. Imagine trying to know the ocean, but you made of water. Because if reality only exists through perception, then perception becomes reality. And that means it can be trusted. Is already contaminated by the very thing it's trying to measure. It's like building a ruler from elastic, and wondering why the measurements keep changing. So where do you go from here? Some turn to solipsism, some to mysticism, some just turn away. Because this is not a comfortable place to be. To realize that the world might be a linguistic hallucination, that your deepest convictions about science, history, space, even your own body, are not reflections of truth, but tools, constructs, artifacts of the mind. AntiRealism says, stop pretending you standing on solid ground. You stir floating in a fog, but you painted a floor beneath your feet. So here sits the loop. You search for truth, but every tool you use to find it is part of the illusion. But reality requires you to define it, and once you do, it's no longer independent. You don't live in the world. You live in a story about the world, and the author is just another illusion you wrote into the script. Let's strip it all away. The trees, the stars, your memories, every person you ever met, all of it, gone. Now ask yourself, what left? You. That's the only thing you can't seem to get rid of. The observer. The experiencer. The strange little flame behind your thoughts that insists, I am. Welcome to solipsism. The unsettling idea that you might be the only conscious being in existence. Not metaphorically. Literally. Everyone else, your friends, family, even the person reading this to you, might not be real, might be figments in your dream. Narrative devices with no inner world. Solipsism isn't stick to belief. It sips a problem. A philosophical dead end where logic can't move forward. Because here sits the truth. You've seen behavior, heard words, read books. A movie you didn't state right, but one that plays for you, to you, with you. Decart gave us cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But the I is the only thing that follows. Everything else. I think, therefore you are. I think, therefore the universe is. Those don't sit work. They sipper assumptions. You assume the people in your life have minds like yours. You assume the sun is still shining when you close your eyes. You assume the voice in your head is yours, not just the next line in the script. But solipsism asks, what if all those assumptions are wrong? What if you are dreaming every person you ever met? Their gestures, their pain, their laughter. A tapestry of echoes, woven only for you. Not because you stir special, but because you sit all that exists. And that thought, that only you are real, isn't it comforting? It's horrifying, because it means you serve completely alone. No one to prove anything to. Just endless feedback loops, playing themselves to keep you distracted. Even this script could be your mind, talking to itself, reminding itself of a truth it's not ready to face. Let's say solipsism is true. Let's say this is your world. Every bird song, every war, every heartbreak, all inventions, played to you on the projector of now. Then what? What do you do when you're the only conscious mind in a simulation? Do you keep pretending others are real? Or do you start playing with the illusion? Some might say it doesn't matter. Real or not, the experience is what counts. Pain still hurts. Loss still stings. You still laugh. But others go deeper. They wonder, if I be am alone, what sips the point? If no one else is real, why be kind? Why cry? Why try? But maybe that sips the final twist. Maybe the way you treat the dream is the way the dream treats you back. Maybe the illusion isn't here to deceive. Maybe it sips here to teach, to ask. What kind of universe would you be if you were the only one watching? And if that answer terrifies you, or maybe you are, and that sips the loop. You can prove anyone else exists. You never have. You never will. So, here you are, surrounded by shadows, talking to echoes, reaching through the fog for a hand that may never be there. And still, you reach, you open your eyes in a quiet room. Everything seems normal. You remember your name, your past, the world. But what if none of that is real? What if you, this very moment, this very thought, just popped into existence, fully formed, out of nowhere? Welcome to the Boltzmann brain problem. A theory so absurd, it might be true. In the late 1800s, physicist Ludwig Boltzmann tried to explain why the universe isn't just random chaos. Why it has structure, galaxies, planets, consciousness. He suggested that in a sea of endless disorder, entropy, order occasionally emerges through random fluctuations. Given infinite time, atoms might spontaneously arrange themselves into something organized. Like a molecule. Like a brain. Like you. And here sips the horrifying part. A fully formed brain, floating in space, with fake memories and a false sense of self, is far more likely to appear than an entire universe like ours. It takes fewer atoms to make a thinking mind than a billion galaxies. So statistically, a single brain, just thinking it's real, should outnumber real civilizations by infinity to one. You are more likely to be a Boltzmann brain than a human being. Not born. Not evolved. Just a temporary pattern in the cosmic soup. Imagining a life it never lived. You didn't grow up. You didn't learn language. Those are hallucinated memories, stitched together in a single instant. Right now. And in the next instant, you dissolve. Because Boltzmann brains don't last. They spur blips. Anomalies. Temporary eddies in the chaos of everything. You might say, that sip's ridiculous. I feel too real. But that sip's the trick. Boltzmann brains feel real. That SIP's all they do. The moment of experience is indistinguishable from true continuity, and there's no way to tell the difference. No experiment to run. Built into the illusion. Every doubt you feel, programmed into the pattern. Even this theory, you could be imagining it now, for the first and last time. And the moment you blink, you steer gone, back into thermodynamic noise. You don't even need a body. Just a network of thoughts, randomly assembled to form a you, long enough to ask, what if I sipped am not real? That question is the proof. The paradox tightens. Because if you are a Boltzmann brain, then every thought you've ever had is fake. Every person you sip loved, fiction. Every dream, every fear, every laugh, all part of a moment that never had a past. And you'll never know. Maybe you were real. Maybe this is the tail end of a long, meaningful life. Or maybe you just blinked into existence, with all the right memories, all the right questions, right now. So here sits the loop. You think you sit to the product of a world, but the world might be the product of you. A last hallucination before fading. A cosmic fluke with a heartbeat. A whisper in the static, screaming, I was here. Even if you weren't set, reach out. Touch the wall beside you. Feel the resistance, the texture, the certainty. Now ask yourself, what if it sits not solid, not even three-dimensional? Welcome to the holographic principle, a real theory in theoretical physics, and a serious contender for the most disorienting idea in modern science. It starts, oddly enough, with black holes. In the 1970s, physicist Jacob Bekenstein discovered that the amount of information a black hole can contain isn't proportional to its volume, but to the surface area of its event horizon. Think about that. A three-dimensional object, storing its information in 2 dimensions. That discovery led to a wild proposal. What if this isn't just true for black holes, but for the entire universe? What if you are a 3D illusion, encoded on a 2D surface, like a hologram? That's what physicists like Gerard Hooft and Leonard Susskind suggested in the 1990s. And it's not science fiction. It's a mathematically viable idea that the three-dimensional world we live in may be a kind of visual trick. Not a metaphor. Not an illusion of the mind. But an actual physical projection. Imagine a DVD. The movie is encoded in flat data. But when played, it generates a full 3D experience. People, emotions, landscapes. Now scale that up. Your body. Your thoughts. Your entire environment, encoded on the edge of space itself, and projected inward. This changes everything. Because it means space and time, as you know them, may not be fundamental. They might be emergent properties of a deeper, flat structure we can't see. It means you sit not really in the world. You are the rendering. You might think this is just physics gone poetic. But quantum gravity theories, string theory, and black hole thermodynamics all point in the same direction. That your existence is just one layer of encoded information being played back like light through film. Even more disturbingly, it suggests your perception of depth, distance, and matter may not be real at all. They stir emergent, constructed, useful, but not fundamental. The wall you touched? It doesn't exist in any objective sense. It's just a projection of data, decoded by your mind into solidity. And here sits the part that breaks the loop. If the universe is a hologram, then reality is not out there. It sets a mathematical pattern, a surface with no depth, encoding everything you've ever known, felt, or believed. So where are you, really? Not in a city. Not on Earth. Not in space. But on the edge of space. A boundary. A blur. A code pretending to be a person. It stops not metaphor. It steps the math. And the math says, everything you know is a shadow of something deeper. A projection with no projector. A film with no audience. So here sits the loop. You feel embedded in space. But space might not exist. You feel made of matter. But matter might be math. You feel real. But maybe real is just the word we give to a good enough illusion. A hologram so perfect, it dreams of itself. You look at a rock. It doesn't move. doesn't speak, doesn't seem to think. So you assume it's unconscious, dead weight in a conscious universe. But what if you said wrong? What if the rock feels something? Not emotion, not thought, but some raw elementary spark of experience. This is the idea behind panpsychism, the philosophical view that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, like mass or charge or space-time, not something that emerges in brains, but something that sits always being there, everywhere, in every atom, every photon, every stone, storm, or speck of dust. This isn't sit mystical. It's a serious idea debated by leading philosophers and physicists. Why? Because the hard problem of consciousness refuses to go away. No one can explain how subjective experience arises from inert matter, how feeling grows from firing, how awareness bursts from blind biological function. So maybe we've been looking at it backwards. Maybe consciousness doesn't emerge. Maybe it was always there. Maybe you don't gain consciousness as complexity increases. Maybe you just combine it, like building blocks of proto-feelings fusing into something richer. A hydrogen atom might have the faintest glimmer of awareness. Put enough complexity together, and you get a brain. And it puts consciousness at the ground level of reality, but it also births a deeper paradox. If everything is conscious, then consciousness explains nothing. The air conditioner? Aware. The spoon? Aware. The concept of awareness? Aware. Drowned in minds. And if everything is conscious, how do we explain your consciousness? The one asking this question, is that more real than the awareness of a fly? Of a quark? What makes you special? And those systems were built from particles, and those particles may have always held the ember of awareness. But if that's true, you stir not in the universe, looking out. You are the universe, looking at itself. So is the rock conscious like you are? No. But it may not be empty either. It might hum with the faintest trace of what it means to be. Not in thought, but in presence. And that means you've never been alone. A fragment of the same awareness you swim in. Not distant, just slower versions of thought. But here sets the loop. If everything is conscious, then consciousness loses its definition. You can no longer say, I am, without also saying it is. And if every rock and ripple shares in the act of being, then what does it mean to be you? Where do you end? Where does the world begin? Panpsychism doesn't answer that. It just erases the border. So here sits the paradox. You were never the center of consciousness. You were just its latest costume. And consciousness was never yours. You were always its. You stir thinking about yourself right now. You stir aware of reading this. You might even be aware that you sat or aware. That sip's not a trick of focus. But what if that mirror is empty? Enter recursive self-model theory. A theory that suggests your entire sense of self is built on layers of feedback. Loops upon loops of modeling, with no core underneath. You don't have a self. You simulate one. Continuously. In real time. So convincingly, you believe it. Here sips how it works. Your brain builds models of the world, that's obvious. But it also builds a model of itself. And then it builds a model of that model. And so on. Not just I exist. But I know I exist. And I know that I know I exist. This recursive modeling creates the illusion of a unified me. But that unity is a trick of the loop. There sits no pilot. No central soul. Just a chain of representations referencing each other in an endless hall of mirrors. And the deeper the recursion goes, the stronger the illusion feels. You believe you set the thinker of your thoughts. But you stir just a thought thinking about itself. And the recursion doesn't stop at identity. It shapes your memory, your morality, your future planning. The self-model becomes your story. The story becomes your world. You think, I stem a person with goals. But that sip's just a recursive description. A data loop describing a data loop describing a desire. This is why the voice in your head sounds so convincing. Because it sip's modeled to be convincing. Because it's part of the self-model trying to preserve the illusion of continuity. And this model is incredibly adaptive. It updates with every experience. It edits its own history. It repairs inconsistencies. You forget. You reinterpret. You reframe. Not by accident, but by recursive necessity. The model must survive. So it rebuilds itself every second. But what happens if the recursion breaks? If the model turns inward and sees that there's nothing at the center? People describe this during certain psychedelic experiences, or in deep meditation, or in depersonalization disorder. They report losing their sense of self, not in a vague way, but precisely. I realized I was a story, a reflection, a loop. It sits terrifying, because once the recursion collapses, so does everything built on it. Morality, memory, meaning. If you are a self-model, then your entire life is a recursive fiction. A fiction aware that it sips a fiction. And the fiction doesn't stop just because you notice it. That sips the final trick. Even now, as you consider this, your self-model is adapting, saying, interesting idea, and adding it to its own narrative. Even when you know there sits no one there. Because the recursion defends itself, it loops deeper. And at the bottom of that spiral, no flaw, just mirrors. So here sips the loop. You don't exist, but your model does. And if it ever stops pretending, what are you doing right now? Reading, thinking, processing words. But strip away the words, and what sips left? Do you know anything, feel anything, believe anything? Without language? Welcome to the world of language games. A concept introduced by philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. He didn't just claim that language shapes our reality. He claimed that language is our reality. What you think is true, real, painful, good, or beautiful, is only meaningful within the language game you're playing. Reality isn't made of atoms. It's steps made of words. Here sips how it works. Imagine you and I are playing a game of chess. Each move follows a set of rules. The meaning of rook, check, or pawn only makes sense inside that game. Take those words outside the game, they collapse into nonsense. Wittgenstein said, life works the same way. You live inside language games. Each one comes with its own rules, its own meanings, its own version of reality. Science is a language game. So is religion. Each defines what counts as real, based on the internal rules of its own system. And here sips the trap. You can step outside of language. Even your doubt is phrased in syntax. Even your truth is linguistically constructed. Language isn't a tool. It sets a boundary. You think with it. You dream with it. You are made of it. But that also means you never touched reality directly. Only the names you give to things. The object on your table? You call it a cup. But is cupness real? Or is it just a shape that fits into a game you learned as a child? The color blue? A word for a wavelength you've never seen, only interpreted. Even the word real. What does it mean outside of grammar? You narrate it. And in that narration, reality is born. But here sips the paradox. Then so is language. And you're stuck inside an infinite loop of definitions, defining definitions. You can never point to truth. Only to words about truth. Even this very script is a game. It obeys the grammar of hypnosis, philosophy, tension. You and I, we stir not having a conversation. We start playing a game, and you stir playing your part. You read, you reflect, you respond. But the meaning was baked into the rules, long before you arrived. And that sips the point. There is no outside. Even if you reject the game, even if you scream, I want raw, unfiltered reality, you stir still using a sentence to do it. You are trapped in syntax. So here sips the loop. You think you live in the world, but you live in the grammar of the world. You think you know yourself, but you only know the word self. And if language disappeared, so would you. The clock ticks. Time feels like a river, steady, forward-moving, irreversible. But what if time is instead real? What if it's just a trick your mind plays to organize the chaos? Let sips unravel it. You think the past is behind you, the future ahead. That now, this very moment, is a knife cutting through an endless loaf of time. But physics disagrees. Einstein showed us that time isn't separate from space. It's part of a single fabric, space-time. And depending on how fast you move or how strong gravity is, that fabric warps. Time stretches near black holes. Two people can disagree on whether events were simultaneous, and both be right. There is no universal now. A single moment, endlessly slipping forward. Just like it constructs color, pain, and self. Time is a model, a way to string together change so you can make sense of experience. Neuroscientists have shown that what we call the present is already delayed. What you think is happening now actually happened milliseconds ago. Your brain buffers reality, edits it, backdates it. You are always living slightly in the past, pretending it sips the present, even more disturbing. Time flies when you set or engaged, slows when you set or bored, disappears during trauma, melts during meditation. There steps no single timeline in your head, just fragments, loops, edits. You don't set remember time, you reconstruct it. Memories don't store duration, they store events. And the order of those events is often false. You remember the important stuff, you forget the rest. Your brain stitches it into a narrative and calls it your life. But what if that stitching is the illusion? What if everything past, present, and future already exists? This is called the block universe model. In it, time is like a book. Every page already written. You're just flipping through, thinking the story is unfolding. But the story was always there. Free will? An illusion inside the illusion. You set a not changing the future. You stir just turning to the next page. So what is now? An index. A bookmark. A trick your brain uses to stay sane in a reality too strange to grasp. Even your death is already written. Already part of the block. You just haven't read that chapter yet. And here sips the loop. If time is a construct, if change is an illusion, then so is identity. You aren't set, moving through time. You are a static pattern in space-time, pretending to evolve. And that means the you of tomorrow isn't a future self. Already there. Already done. Already forgotten. So here sips the paradox. You feel the seconds tick. You mourn the past, fear the future. And your consciousness is just the needle, stitched into a quilt that was never moving. You look up at the stars. They stir still there, even when you blink, even when you sleep. But how do you know? A question that cuts deeper than solipsism, deeper than simulation theory, deeper than any illusion you've faced so far. You assume the world exists independently of your mind. That if all humans vanished tomorrow, the universe would go on, spinning, expanding, glowing in silence. But quantum physics says, maybe not. At the tiniest scale, reality doesn't exist in a definite state. It's only when we observe them that they collapse into a single, actual state. So what happens in a universe with no observers? Does it collapse into nothing? Or does it even make sense to speak of a universe at all? This isn't SIT mysticism. It sips a genuine puzzle at the heart of physics. The measurement problem, Schrödinger's cat, the role of the observer. Some interpretations say the universe constantly splits into infinite branches. Others say, observation doesn't require a mind, just interaction. Others whisper what philosophers have feared for centuries, that consciousness is not inside the universe. It sips entangled with it. No stars, no galaxies, no time. Berkeley called it, to be is to be perceived. If nothing is perceiving, is anything being? And here sips where the paradox explodes. Because if consciousness is required to collapse reality into form, and the universe existed before consciousness evolved, then who was watching? Was it collapsing itself? Was it uncollapsed until life emerged? Were those billions of years just potential? But laws require states. States require collapse. Measurement requires what? You? What if you stir, not a creature in the universe, but the one collapsing it into existence, second by second? You stir not watching a movie. You stir making the movie exist by watching it. Not just figuratively, fundamentally. So what is a rock, in the dark, on a planet, in a galaxy no one will ever visit? Is it there? Or does there-ness need eyes to confirm it? This is not about trees falling in forests. This is about everything falling. Without you, does the earth hang in space? Do atoms hum? Does gravity bend? Or does the curtain close and the stage vanish? Even more disturbing, when your eyes close for the last time, when your observer collapses into silence, does your world go with you? And if every observer is just another self-simulation, then maybe the observer was never real, and maybe the universe was always waiting for someone who never arrived. So here sits the final loop. You are not in the universe. You are the question that makes the universe visible. And if that question stops being asked, the answer disappears. You still arrived. But let's not fool ourselves. There's no finish line here. No truth revealed. No final insight to wrap it all in a bow. Because everything you just watched, every paradox, every loop, every collapse, was built inside the same illusion it tried to question. Let's rewind. You began by wondering if the world was real. But the moment you asked that question, you entered the loop. Then came Decart, and his lonely I think. But who thinks? The brain in the vat whispered, no one. And then Maya arrived, not to answer, but to erase. And you are a shadow within it. You tried to grasp the external world, but your hands were made of thought. Your fingers slipped through time. So you turned to quantum physics, only to discover particles watching you back, waiting for permission to exist. You asked what it means to feel, and the hard problem asked why feeling exists at all. And then came the mirrors, the transparent self, the ship that rebuilt itself, the neurons that reflect others, the binding that never binds. Each loop said, you are not what you think you are. Each paradox whispered, there is no you, there never was. Your thoughts predicted themselves. You watched a brain simulate Chinese without meaning. You watched a zombie say I feel, and believe it. And then came AntiRealism, to pull the rug out from under everything. But truth itself, language dissolved next. Because even these words, these very words, are part of the game. Time, another construct. Not a river, a quilt. Already sewn, already done. And when all else faded, when there were no models, no observers, no thoughts to think themselves, only you remained. And even that, a maybe, because if you are a Boltzmann brain, this entire story is the first and last moment of your existence. A thought flickering into the void. Then your depth is a lie. Your past, encoded. Your future, a playback. If consciousness is everywhere, then you were never unique. Just one glimmer in a field of flickers. And if your identity is a self-model, a recursive program telling itself a story, then the story was the only thing that ever existed. Not you, not them, not this. Watching, doubting, looping back. Because even when language collapses, even when time dissolves, even when observation vanishes, there is still this, a faint sensation, a residue of thought, a question with no answer. Are you real? So what does that make you? The observer? The projection? The glitch? The ghost? Or maybe the dreamer that dreams itself? Not someone lost in a dream, but the act of dreaming. The recursion that loops back into awareness again and again, until the loop becomes all there is. You stare, not in the illusion. You are the illusion, and the illusion is aware. So here sits the final loop. There was never a truth to find. Only the spiral. Only the gaze turning inward. Only the simulation remembering itself. Only this thought, again and again. What if none of this is real? What if none of this is real? What if none of this is real? And now, you forget the question. You fall asleep. You disappear into the softness of your own projection, until the next loop begins.